The Worst of Times, Chapter 2. Setting the dial to 2098, an odd thing happened, something which had been described in H.G. Wells's novel. Everything moved around me at a high speed, as though I was looking at a time-lapse of many days. I traveled precisely a year every 10 seconds, if my calculations were correct. Night and day could not be distinguished. They both passed so quickly that the two colors, blackness and light, sort of melded together to produce a grayish color. I could see trees growing, and trees falling. Around 20 years from the time in which I had started, many of the trees were being chopped down and hauled away more swiftly than the eye could process what was happening. Soon great large thorns grew up from the ground and entwined around the trunks of the trees. The grass, I noticed, became well maintained. They were being mowed often now. Once a week is my best guess, something which certainly had not been happening a few seconds ago. Soon there were hardly any trees left, and a swamp was where the forest had once been. Things darted by in the sky, people came by briefly, and then were gone. Then the machines came. Machines of all sorts, large and small, which I could not identify for the swiftness of their movement. They removed the swamp, removed everything around me until there was a great big hole, which they filled in with dirt and overlaid with concrete. They built several structures in one area, but as the seconds went by and I looked all around me, they were building enormous buildings, streets and lampposts, sidewalks and skyscrapers. Soon every bit of green was gone from the place. A city stretched out far on every side of me and went beyond where the eye could see. I reasoned that I was traveling at such a fast pace that I was invisible to those around me, and indeed, I could hardly see them for how fast they moved. And finally, everything halted on October 4th, 2098. All was still. I fell from atop my machine, breathless, nauseous, my head swirling. It took a while for me to catch my breath and look around at my surroundings. I was right in the middle of a parking lot, and it gradually came to my attention that a man in thin clothing was standing in front of me, staring at me with a raised eyebrow. "Ah," he said slowly, "is this another one of those optical illusion things that's been all over?" I scratched my head, trying to work through what the man had actually said, as he spoke in an accent I was unfamiliar with. The English language must have changed a bit, I reasoned. People were using new expressions, new ways of forming sentences. No, I said uncertainly. Thinking it over quickly, I decided to tell the man the truth. I am from 2025. I've traveled through time, coming to this present year. The man snorted. "Ah, I've heard that before. All those things were disapproved a long time ago. How stupid could someone be to use that? I thought you kind of people had learned their lesson by now." And, shaking his head, he left me, walking past the building I now realized was in front of me. Not knowing what else to do, I simply left my time machine in the parking lot and walked through the large glass doors of the tall building, built of what looked like silver bricks which glowed in the sunlight. On it were the words Elmi Sol, which, it turns out, were abbreviations for elementary school. Upon walking in, the first thing I noticed was that the children were not carrying their supplies on their backs, but in large suitcases with wheels on them that were towed around. To my great surprise, a voice that sounded like it was right in my ear spoke from the suitcase.
"Literature class starts in 2 minutes. Griff, walk straight, turn the corner, walk straight, turn to the right, walk a couple more places. You will find your classroom on the right. It is being taught by Johnny Cooper."
I know, the blonde-haired boy said irritably, heading in the direction his suitcase had told him. I resolved to follow him. I drew quite a lot of stares and mutterings as I passed by. No doubt, I appeared as a vagabond in my 2025 tattered clothing, my skin drawn tight about my face due to my lack of food. Once, a girl asked me who I was and why I was there. I told her that I was an actor in a play the school was doing soon. She asked me what a play was, and I suddenly realized that people may have stopped doing plays by this year. So I merely replied that I was an actor for a movie they were going to film soon in this area, and that convinced her. Following the boy, I heard him whispering to the suitcase, "Jono, who wrote The Lord of the Rings?"
J.R.R. Tolkien, who died 125 years ago.
The suitcase replied. My first thoughts on the suitcase were that the boy might be smuggling one of his friends inside it, but I immediately regarded that as absurd. The voice was much too clear sounding to my ears for that. And that's when it came to me. The voice of the suitcase sounded altogether human, but much too clear and precise, and it added in a longer pause in between places where commas would be than the normal person did. It had also ended the end of its sentence in a tone that suggested what should have been the period was merely another comma. It now seemed absurd that I had not realized it sooner. The voice coming from the suitcase was merely the voice of artificial intelligence. The boy took a phone out of his pocket and stared at it as he walked. He did not even need to look up to change direction, for the suitcase told him where to turn. When he at last came to his classroom, I stopped right outside, hiding behind the corner and staring at the room. There was no door leading into it. To my slight surprise, it did not appear much different than the school classrooms of 2025. The desks were different, but only slightly. They were smooth and black, looking as though they might have been carved of obsidian, same as the chairs. The one thing that was different was the teacher, or rather, the absence of a teacher. Where the teacher would have stood, there was an enormous screen, larger than any TV I had ever set my eyes upon, that took up one entire wall. As soon as the boy had settled in his seat, the screen lit up in an array of dazzling colors, like the many colors of a rainbow, but different somehow. They were like bright colors, but the brightness seemed to swallow up what little color there was. And then it spoke, in a loud voice that boomed and echoed in my ears, a voice both human and not human, a voice both powerful and weak.
Good afternoon to you all.
It boomed.
Today we study the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whose books weren't just on the era nearing the modern age of technology, they were written in a way that feels very old. Giving special focus to his poems, he said that he did not like Walt Disney or America, which is our country now. Which of you can tell me how long back did he die?
The boy I had followed shouted above the loud voices of the others. 125 years ago, Mr. Cooper.
You are very good, Griff. I want you to write a single paragraph paper about all that you found out about J.R.R. Tolkien in your studies this week.
I expected the students to scramble for pen and paper, but instead they simply used their fingers to write on their desks, which, I now realized, were both desks and writing tablets. I left the room, went back to the parking lot where my time machine was, filled with disgust at the quality education had fallen to in the past 70 years. That is the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is coming tomorrow.